On episode 312 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Jay Dicharry and discuss his book, Running Rewired. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/312. Our sponsor for this podcast is Fresh Pressed Olive Oil Club. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/olive oil and you can claim a $39 bottle of their fresh pressed olive oil for just $1. They want you to try it out, see if you like it. You're under no obligation to buy anything else from them. But if you go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/olive oil, they'll sell you a $39 retail value bottle of olive oil. This is some really good stuff. I got my first shipment in this week, and I've been going through it and sampling it. And let me tell you that this is some really good stuff. And the other thing is I just know that I'm getting high quality because they take the time to find the farms where the olives are just hitting the peak of ripeness, and they're pulling them at that point, pressing them, and getting them into your hands as quickly as they possibly can. So this is going to be fresh, you know it's going to be good, and it tastes delicious. Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/olive oil to help support the show and get some of the best olive oil I think you can get your hands on.
Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go.
Hello, and welcome to the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. I am so happy to have you here. So glad that you're a part of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. We have a great guest today. Really enjoyed my conversation with him and the mechanics of running. A really good conversation. But before we get there, I did want to kind of update you on a few things that are going on right now. We're getting ready, and we've actually launched the sign up for 2 new challenges in April. Thought I'd go big with April with 2 challenges this time. One of them is the squat challenge. It's the same challenge. If you were with us in February, then it's going to be the same challenge as that. You can up it a level, or you can just go through the same level again. Or if you were unable to join us, please do. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/squat. Again, that's 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/squat. And that'll give you the sign up page for the squat challenge. Now, once you've signed up for that, be looking for that registration email, because if you don't click the link, I can't send you the workouts. So it is really important that you find that link, that email. It'll come straight away. As soon as you click go, it should come in. Now, some email providers do screen. For one reason or another, they see my emails and think I'm trying to spam you. So you just need to be looking for that email. As soon as you finish signing up, it'll take you to a welcome page to remind you, but you need to go check your email at that point and see if you can find it. It might be in your spam and promotions folder. The second challenge that I'm introducing, and this is a new one, so I'm in the process of writing it right now, is called the No Alcohol Challenge. And we're going to start both of these challenges April 1st, and both challenges go for 28 days. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/alcohol, and that'll take you to the alcohol challenge. And same as the challenge for squats, I'll want you to go ahead and confirm your email address by clicking the button on the email that should come as soon as you finish signing up. You go to a welcome page, and that email should be sitting in your box by the time you get over to your email box. If it's not in your inbox, again, please check your promotions, spam. Check with your email provider to see if their help section will help you find maybe where they've pre-screened some of these things. Because I find every time some folks just don't seem to be getting the emails, and it's their email provider is not giving them all messages. They try to do a really good job of screening spam, but unfortunately, they also means that they screen some emails that you do want to receive. So be on the lookout for that. So that's the squat challenge at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/squat, and the No Alcohol Challenge at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/alcohol. Both of those are going to kick off on April 1st. The last day to sign up is the 30th of April at 5 p.m. Central. I need to cut it off so I can start sending out the emails and make sure everybody's on track as we get started to make April a very, very good squat month and a very, very good health month. So I hope you will join us on those 2 challenges. I do enjoy being there, and I enjoy interacting with folks as they go through it. And the results most people get have been fabulous. So if you want to participate, That's 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/squat and 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/alcohol. I hope you'll join us on at least one of those, if not both. So our guest today is Jay Dicharry, and he is a physical therapist, but he focuses predominantly on runners. And I, as a personal trainer, really enjoy talking to physical therapists because these guys, they're in the meat of it. They're seeing the injuries, they're seeing the problems. And, the cool thing about Jay is not just about getting his athletes better, fixing their injuries. He wants them to prevent having injuries again. So a lot of his practice is really preventative in nature. So you're going to learn a lot, even if you don't like to run. I think there's a lot of good content, a lot of good stuff in this one, just about maintaining overall body integrity and health. So with no further ado, here's Jay Dicharry. So Jay, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure.
The book Running Rewired, there was a lot in the book that we're not going to be able to get into today, which is disappointing because as I kind of just read through the book, I'm like, that's really good. And then this next chapter I'm getting into, and I'm like, man, that's really good too. And so given that we don't have unlimited time, because I think I could talk to you for hours about what concepts you have in the book, because I think they're brilliant. But I wanted to take it down to a few of them. But there is one that I want to mention. I didn't really put this into the plan, but I loved how you talked about hardware and software problems and how, you start getting into, the reasons why running can be a problem for folks that don't really have good form and all those different things. And I don't think in a podcast we can really get into form, and we probably could get a little bit into the psychology of why things would work for one person and wouldn't work for someone else. But I like that was in the book because I think that's a often overlooked concept.
Yeah, totally. It's, anytime you start doing something, whether you're a novice or an expert, you have to look at, can you move? But then, which are kind of those hardware blocks, right? Like, do I have a limited amount of motion in my ankle or my hip or whatever? But then the other thing is, do you know how to control the motion you already have? And that's a big part of what I see. And then not even to go down a big elaborate diatribe on this, you can make it pretty simple. All the time I see runners who actually have motion that they can't access. And that directly relates to your form, right? If I can't move correctly, then all of a sudden I have compromises in my form, and then somebody tells you, "Oh, try and do this when you run." You're like, "I don't know how to do that."
Yeah.
So you have to kind of comprehensively learn to move better.
And that's what I was working with a woman on her squats. So I'm doing the one-on-one coaching online with her, and I'm looking at her video, and I gave her a cue, and she came back the next week with a video, and it was different, but it wasn't better. And then, we go another week and I'm like, okay, I don't want her to wreck herself because she just isn't getting the cues that I'm giving her as we talk through it. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do: full stop. We're not going to do the back squat anymore. I want you to do the front squat. So I sent her over some videos to demonstrate how to do the front squat. So she starts doing the front squat, and then suddenly it's like the light went on in her head. Oh, that's what he was talking about. Because if I do what I was doing on a front squat, I'm going to drop the bar. Right. Because she was just leaning a little bit too forward and she wasn't really getting her butt back, and there's just a few different things on how she was moving down. And when I had her on the front squat, she did the front squat for about 3 weeks, came back to the back squat, and it added 20 pounds to her back squat. And it was just simply the fact that trying to get her to rewire her brain to think differently, because the words I was using and trying to tell her, like you said, run better, it just really wasn't something she could wrap her head around.
Yeah, I call those forced use scenarios. So you select a certain activity, which sort of you have to figure out how to move under that challenge. And the nice thing is that it's not something you're reading, you're feeling it, right? I mean, you're basically, you have a load, or you have a dowel, or you have a certain block in front of you, whatever, and you have to figure out how to move that way. And people's eyes usually blow wide open, like, wow, this is different, right? And then so you do that, and you kind of again build a little muscle memory there, and then you can access it, and then things soar.
Yeah, and I think that was, like I said, as I got into the book and I was like, okay, he's really touching on some important concepts. I almost felt like I was reading a book that was written by a physical therapist, because it had a little bit of that feel of understanding the physical side, but it also kind of had the psychology side of it, which again, I think just really what if someone wants to run well, I think the things that you have in the book are really going to help them. Now, one of the core reasons that I wanted to have you on the show, and I really want to talk about this because you had it in the book, was a lot of people initially think, okay, I'm trying to lose weight,
so I'm going to get out and start running because they've been told, running's going to be great for weight loss. You'll burn calories and you'll lean up. And for a lot of people, that's true. But there's some things that happen to our bodies when we start running that I think someone who's a little overweight or even a lot overweight, that we should be thinking about as we're running.
Yeah, totally. And if you just kind of take a big picture step back at this, right, and you got to think about people say, I want to use running as a tool to lose weight, and that's great. And running is a great tool to burn calories. But I approach it from two pieces. I want you to run well and be happy and enjoy running. But at the flip side, I'm the guy who has to pick up the pieces after you basically took off and tried to hit your New Year's resolution of a certain number of mileage goals or beat your friends' mileage goals on your social media account, and all of a sudden you fell apart. And so I want to make sure that we look at this as a comprehensive strategy. We're not just building runners, we're building athletes here. And, everybody has their own inner athlete. We're trying to help you access that to make sure that you're learning to move the best you can, to run the best you can, and look at, again, longevity and health. I mean, this stuff should effectively be fun, but it should improve your longevity and health as well.
Yeah. Now, I've run in the past. I don't run as much now. I mean, I'm like marathons, ultras, and things like that. So I've done some running in my past. And I would say each time I ran, I pretty much qualified as a Clydesdale. And for those that don't know what a Clydesdale is, it's basically a runner that's over 195 pounds. Your example in the book of someone was 150 pounds and kind of the load that they're putting on their body. Obviously, me weighing 45 to, I guess at this point, I'm somewhere around 50 pounds heavier than your example runner there. There's some things that I should know about when I'm running that's happening to my body. Can you kind of go through that?
Sure. Yeah. So this is a really important point. I mean, people always talk about running as a sport that has kind of low load applied for a long period of time. And it's, that's kind of just talked about, it's a small amount of force for a long amount of time. I mean, you run for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. But that's actually not true at all. We actually measure these things in a lab like I run. And so you can actually measure, when you're in mid stance, the average runner is putting about 2.5 to 3 times their body weight down to the ground. Whether you like this statement or not, the reality is your bones, tendons, ligaments, muscles, cartilage, I mean, everything, right, is seeing loads that are really, really, really high. And, I always think about, if you're in school and you have a test, the first thing you think about is, what's on the test? What do I study for? And running's not just a sport where you get your heart rate up. It's where you're just training your engine. You have to train the chassis. And to run well and be, which is longevity and improving performance, you need to make sure that you are building a chassis that can tolerate those loads, not for one stride or two strides, but for 3, 5, 10, 26.2 miles and beyond, right? So it's really critical to make sure that you're thinking about your body developing comprehensively. Your bones have to be strong enough. Your tendons have to be your big elastic springs. I kind of throw energy from joint to joint, and our muscles have to exert a lot of load, and all of our ligaments and cartilage tissue kind of supports and stabilizes the joint itself, and all those tissues have to adapt over time, right? And if you're smart in the way you structure your program and progressively increase volume, that happens. And if you just say, I'm going to knock out, I've been riding the bike for X number of minutes per week, I'll just run that same number of minutes per week. Completely different stresses in your body, right? And that's where I think people get in trouble. It's not running is this badge of honor sport, which we're always talking about volume and times. And I made it my career to try and change discussion from quality to quantity. From quantity to quality.
Absolutely. And I think that's the main thing. I mean, if you really kind of thought about it, that the force on your body is 2.5 times your weight. That'd be like taking a bar that's your body weight plus 50%. And holding it on your shoulders and just kind of feeling how that presses down on your body. And I think for anybody that's ever lifted that heavy, and there's not a lot of people that do, that's a lot of weight. And you step away from a rack with that kind of weight on your shoulder, and you recognize straight away that's a problem if you don't have the musculature and the strength to be able to handle that weight. The cool thing is, though, our bodies can adapt and adjust and get stronger if we do things the right way and don't hurt ourselves on the way. We can get strong enough to handle those stresses.
Totally. And just to clarify one thing, so just so people aren't like, wait a second, that's impossible. How can I, just like you said, just putting the weight in the rack and stepping back, and that's like an inordinate amount of load. There's no way I can run doing that. And the way you run, right? So under ideal conditions, meaning if you're running well, about half of the load to lift you up and forward every stride, right, comes from muscle work, right? So your muscles are actually providing half that load. And then the other half comes from the storage and release of elastic energy in your tendons, which are like big rubber bands.
Yeah.
And so, don't think you have to do a single leg squat with 307 pounds, but that's how much stress your body sees, right? So when you start saying, "Gee, I have this muscle strain or ache here, or whatever," I mean, that's why it's a lot of load to run well.
Well, if you can do a one-legged squat with 305 pounds, please email me that video because I want I want to see it. Now, one of the core things. One of the things that I wanted to get into, because I do think this is an overlooked part of things, is when we talk about core training and core stability, and I use the term as well, and I probably need to change the vernacular of how I use it when I'm doing training, is to say, okay. And I like the way you put it because it's a really good analogy. Is that your core is three-dimensional? It's not a front and backward. So it's not just the rectus abdominis, this thing that we do when we do the crunches. It's all around our body. And so you use the analogy of a tin can, like a Coke can. Could you kind of talk about that process of stability and what it means when we run?
Yeah, definitely. So to kind of use that idea behind the can, right? So if you take your favorite beverage, crack the top, slam your drink back, and you put the can down on the table, the can has some structure. It has some integrity to it, right? And so you can push down on the can with a little bit of load. You can put a 5-pound weight, 20-pound weight on top of the can. The can's not going to crumple, right? The can's actually pretty intact. And so when you keep things in good alignment, right, they can actually support and tolerate a lot of load very well. When you take that same can and you just kind of dimple the front of it a little bit, right? And you put that, little pressure on top, you put that same 5, 10, or 20-pound weight plate on top of the can, it's going to crumple instantly, right? And so what happens is you start thinking about how this translates to the body. It's a great analogy to talk about, the way we hold our spine, in fact, I'll say any joint really has a core, but let's talk about most of the midsection first. If you can maintain an orientation around lumbar neutral, what happens is the muscles around the spine work very well to stabilize the spine and the pelvis and also the hip musculature. And then if that works well, then your legs track straight and everything tends to work really well. And when we start seeing people have postural compensations where they tend to lean in what I call the back seat, right, with a lot of arch in the low back, or, as we all get tired, we tend to kind of slump forward a little bit as we fatigue for longer runs and sometimes up hills and so forth, you're dimpling that can, right? And when you dimple the can, not only do you change the position of the can, but you change the way that you recruit muscles. And one of the interesting things is in terms of core work, when you show up for a race, nobody's going to ask you how long you can hold a plank and then use it as a measure to adjust your time, right? That just doesn't exist. No one cares how strong your core is. They care how well the core works. And what I mean by well, if you look at all the motor learning research, it says that our core works actually what I call a feed forward capacity, right? So if I'm sitting and I just reach out and I grab something, I change my center of mass over where I'm sitting, right? My body kind of activates to stabilize my trunk. So when I reach my arm out, I don't fall over. If I'm standing, when I walk, naturally, we just tend to actively stabilize our core when I raise one leg so I don't shift and slump and kind of land awkwardly on my next step. And that's a normal kind of phenomenon. And when we see people who have posture problems, which again take them into a flexed or an arch position, or when we have people with chronic low back pain or core strength problems, it's not the fact they're weak, but it's the fact those core muscles don't work at the right time. They actually fire late. And so what happens is you wind up moving in a very unstable position. The other analogy I use is you can't put a jet engine on a paper airplane. It just doesn't work. Right. Yeah. And so if you're trying to transmit a bunch of load through your body and you're not stable, then you can't transmit those forces and things tend to fall apart. So to train the core properly really requires you to going back to that example we said before about finding and feeling proper position, right, requires you to feel what posture neutral is. And I have some kind of drills in the book to help find that. But once you've felt it is to go, okay, this is where I need to, need to be. And I often have runners stop every half mile or so and just basically stand on one leg and go, okay, where's my body weight? Am I in the back seat? Am I neutral? Where am I? And then keep on going, because I want you to, I want to build a positive environment where you know what to aim for. And if you know what to aim for, you'll keep your spine in a better position, and your core musculature that you do have works really well, and your hip muscles work well, and then we can, we're on a path to success.
Yeah. And I like how in the book that you kind of walk us through the whole chain, so we can kind of look at where are we with regards to things. I can tell you, I have problems with the ankles. My dorsiflexion's a problem. And yeah, if I don't take the time to really stretch out before I do running or squats or something like that, I can just feel that my center of mass is off, my whole thing's off, and I risk injury if I don't make sure that I'm warmed up and properly stretched.
Yep.
Now, this is a concept that is near and dear to my heart, because we've just finished up last month. We did a squat challenge, and so the squat challenge, is meant to help folks start using their glutes in a way that they haven't in a long time. But a lot of people tend to be really, really dominant on their quads and weak on their glutes, and that creates some of that stability problem, because again, as you go down the chain, anything that's off is going to affect the rest of it. Can you talk about glutes versus quads and how that's going to affect our running form?
Totally. And this came from some research that we did back at my previous lab at University of Virginia, where we had folks just come in and squat, right? And so we looked at the correlation of, the types of squat patterns people have with the type of running gait they have. And I think one of the interesting things in the running world has been this whole debate on, natural running and running the way you're supposed to, and et cetera. And again, like, you're going to run the way you know how to move. And it was very interesting. What we found was we had people squat, and people who squatted in what's called a quad dominant, or you can just think about a knee dominant squat, right? So when you squat, your knees tend to move more forward, versus somebody who has a glute dominant or a hip dominant strategy, where the hips tend to move backwards when you squat, right? The knees will move forward in everybody. The hips will move back on everybody. But if you look at that general trend of knee forward versus hip back, we found that 92% of the runners who squatted in a knee forward pattern all overstrided. Right. And it's pretty simple. If when you squat in a knee forward pattern, you use mostly quad musculature and not very, very heavy on the glutes. And so it's no surprise you're going to run the same way. And it's, for those of you out there, it's a really simple test you can do. Just basically, even without putting a bar on your back, just go ahead and squat down halfway. And then what I want you to do is I want you to kind of stay the same height you're at and shift your knees forward. You'll very quickly feel the load go to your knee muscles, and then shift your hips backwards at the same height. You'll feel the load go back to your hip muscles, and you kind of oscillate back and forth. And what we're trying to do is to build a better strategy for propulsion, right? So you're truly learning how to access those hip muscles. And when you learn how to access those hip muscles, then you can actually use those hip muscles. And again, it goes back to the whole idea behind changing your stride, right? Right. Most runners tend to overstride because, again, if I love my quads, I'm going to let my leg come out in front of me, which overutilize those muscles. And if I can figure out how to find those muscles around the hips and use them, what happens is we start to get what I call into a push strategy, which is what you want, versus a pulling strategy, where you tend to kind of fall into the knee muscles a lot. So it's truly rewiring the way you move to rewire the way you run.
Yeah, and there's two core reasons anyone that runs will want to do this and understand this concept, because number one, if you're running quad dominant, the opportunity for you to injure your knee goes way, way up. And then The other thing is your glutes are so much stronger than and can be so much stronger than your quads ever can be. So if you can get to that push run, you're going to be much, much stronger as a runner.
Yeah. And on that, kind of protective aspect we talked about staying healthy, right? So when you look at your quad musculature, it's not as strong as your hip muscles, but also your quads really only do two things, right? They slightly flex your hip and they extend your knee, and that's it. And your glutes do three things. So they extend your hip, they control the rotation of the hip, and they also play a huge role in posture, which goes back to the whole idea behind better position when you're running. So again, like activating those muscles the right way and be able to use those when you run really helps keep you in a stable position as you're running.
Yeah. So as we've kind of talked about the different things, so we talked about glutes, we talked about core, and you get into a lot of the other musculature as well, and also the tendons and ligaments and all that, and how that's going to help us build bigger springs and be better, faster runners. There's this one concept that I really wanted to spend a little bit of time on, because I know a lot of runners are thinking, okay, I don't want to put on any weight because weight is going to cause me a problem with running. So they don't want to lift weights necessarily because they don't want to get bigger. And I'll be the first to tell you, putting on mass is not easy. It's a very slow go. But putting on a little bit of mass for the sake of being a better runner, I think is probably going to be worth it. Can you kind of go through the different aspects of muscle as far as, building endurance, building strength, building mass, and how you kind of see the whole training program that you've put together here, how we're going to make the most of each of those?
Yeah, great question. So let's have a little bit of a road to go down here. All right, so let's talk about the why real quick first. So when people love like the one number, right? Everybody wants to talk, what's the one thing I can do to improve? And it's actually pretty simple. I can identify that. If you want to improve your running economy, you need to put more force down to the ground in a shorter period of time. That's very simple. Okay, so what this means is if you put more force down to the ground, then you will respectively go up, right? And so basically you're going to be in the air, so kind of hang time, flight, into your next stride. And so the more force you put down on the ground, what happens, we see people have a longer stride length and longer stride. If you can gain an extra, 1.5, 2.5 centimeters per stride, what happens is you start running faster at the same amount of effort, okay? And so when you look at this kind of comprehensive idea behind building a better running body, we need to train you to put more force down on the ground. And the way to do that is not what's been kind of shoved down our throats as far as, toning exercises, right? So you're doing high repetition and low load type work. That type of exercise is great if you're, for those of you out there have a hard time kind of steering your hips straight and you have people who say, I can't find my glutes and stuff like that. There's, those clamshell exercises and the kind of what I call precision movement exercises are great to build muscle memory and to make you more aware of how you're moving. And they work wonderful. High volume, low intensity work. But when you start looking at improving that rate of force development number, the rules change, right? We have to shift things into a very heavy and very low volume amount of weighted movements to train our muscles to do that, right? And plyometrics kind of fall in the same capacity, but it's trying to build a better force application on the ground. And that does require that we load the body with a little more challenge, right? And it's pretty simple. The body responds to what we stress it with. And if we challenge a body to, push hard, guess what happens? Your brain learns to push harder as you run. And so again, we can use heavier weighted movements with that. We can use squats with this, we can use deadlifts and a bunch of variations, use plyometrics, but it's all trying to change that perception of how you move. And along with that, people have that nervousness and tendency, I'm going to get hurt or I'm going to gain weight. And I always come back to, if you look at the lowest injury rate of any sport out there, it's powerlifting. Okay. And the reason why is they spend lots of time refining the way they move. And that's why in the book, I kind of take people through a little precision movement kind of workout. And then we do some kind of clearance test to make sure we're getting into some stuff to make sure you can hinge from your hip properly and move safely as we progress. And so that takes care of the injury risk aspect of it. And then in terms of the weight gain percentage, the reality is you're running, right? You're running a lot and burning lots of calories. And if that's the case, you're not going to have this huge calorie surplus to build tons of muscle mass. So that I would dispel rumors out there that you're going to suddenly gain 10 pounds. The other thing I would say is, for those of you who are still not convinced, is when it gets interesting, you start looking at what happens as we age, right? Everybody loses lean body mass as we age. And sedentary average people will lose lean body mass as they run, as they age. And the interesting thing is there was a great study that came out that showed that running is not a sufficient stress to maintain lean body mass. People actually got weaker, as they age, even though they ran considerable amounts of volume.
Yeah. Now, the cool thing is the quality of the muscles actually still really, really good. That's one of the things I saw in a study of runners was consistent runners as they age, that the quality of their muscle, when they do the biopsies, they really can't tell the difference between a 55-year-old runner and a 25-year-old runner. They've maintained a quality of muscle mass, but they still are losing muscle mass.
Yeah, exactly. And so, to go back to the idea behind putting more force down on the ground equals a better run. If you're in a situation where that's dropping, you don't want to drop that, right? You want to maintain or improve that. And every study out there shows, you can take men as old as 80, one cohort used the 82 age average male population, and even those subjects, gained lean body mass. So, it's never too late to improve who you are.
Yes. That's a big tenet on this show. So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
So, and that was one of the things that you kind of, as you went in, I was like, okay, I like this guy because he's got people doing deadlifts and he's got people doing squats and, box jumps and those types of things. And so that is kind of a whole holistic look, but you don't just start and say, oh, there's a box, jump up and jump down as fast as you can. There is a process for assessing yourself, understanding some of the movement issues you're going to have. You get into, how we're going to build mobility, but because we've done this kind of self-diagnostic to understand, where we might have issues. So if you put your foot 6 inches from a wall and you can't touch your knee to that wall, you, like me, have dorsiflexion issues. For me, I know it's the tightness of my calf. And so some mobility work and stretching on my calf is going to get me into a proper dorsiflexion, which means when I do lifting or running or anything else, I'm going to be in a much better place to be able to do that effectively and just better.
Totally. Yeah, it's really critical to make sure that you've got that hardware versus software thing, right? Do you actually have a true hardware block that's restricting the way you're moving? And again, if you just throw a bunch of load at the body and it's not prepared for it, you start to do really bad compensations. And if you prepare your body for it, then you can adapt and improve and be fine, right? So, the whole idea is to make sure people are safe, happy, and enjoying what they're doing.
Yeah. So again, Jay, this was a really good book. Anyone that really wants to get better at running, you don't only have just the why, but you put in a whole set of programming, mental and physical, where we can kind of go through and assess the different pieces of what make us a runner and then make us a better runner. So I really did enjoy the book. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, learn more about the book, where would you like for me to send them?
Oh, great. Yeah, they can check out my blog, which is anathletesbody.com. And you can also check out our lab and clinic. We also post lots of stuff out there, which is reporegon.com, reporegon.com. And lots of good buzz out there.
Cool. Well, this is going to be episode 312. So you can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/312, and I'll be sure to have the links there in the show notes. So again, Jay, thank you for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Great. Thanks so much, Alan. It was awesome.
Again, I want to thank you for being a part of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast. Really enjoy spending this time with you. If you enjoyed today's podcast and you haven't done so far, please do give us a rating and review on iTunes. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/review, and that will take you to the review section in iTunes. And it does help the podcast. It helps listeners find podcasts. I'm at about 146, so I'm about 4 shy of 150. I really want to try to get to that number. So if you don't mind, just take just a few minutes. Give us a rating. It goes up to 5 stars, and give us a review. I really appreciate that. So go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/review and leave your rating and review today. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Dr. Lee No and discuss his book, Mitochondria and the Future of Medicine. This is a really fascinating conversation that I had with Dr. No, so I do hope you'll come back and join us next week. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.